Revenge with Karen.
Effective immediately, your bonus is frozen, he said, loud enough for the interns to flinch. I didn't drop my coffee. I didn't curse. I just looked at the director, then the conference room full of blinking finance faces. My bag was already zipped. I stood, pushed my chair in, and walked out with the kind of silence that makes men squirm. That was Tuesday. But let's rewind, shall we? Back to Monday. Back when I was still Margaret from licensing, one who came in early, left late, and kept this entire circus humming without needing a spotlight. My comfort zone was simple: spreadsheets, license dashboards, 6 a.m. black coffee so strong it could resuscitate the dead, and the quiet joy of solving a 3-year revenue glitch before the interns had even clocked in. No fanfare. No pats on the back, just order, routine. The pleasure of a clean data pull. I was the sort of woman who remembered API renewal dates better than birthdays. I didn't gossip in Slack. I didn't circle back unless someone had actually circled something. I had one mug, one chair, one playlist, and one rule: don't mess with the machine if you don't know how it runs. And the machine was me. The new leadership, though, they loved noise. Loved pinging entire channels with questions they could have Googled. Loved their performative grind and team selfies during office happy hours they scheduled in the middle of reconciliation week. They didn't notice the system outages I caught before they spread. Didn't realize our payment renewal engine only worked because I duct-taped 3 vendors into a handshake agreement after they bungled an integration. Didn't even know the name of the licensing platform that held the keys to their precious auto renewals. But I did. I didn't just know it, I owned it. Literally, on paper. My name was on the renewal. But hey, before we go any deeper into this tale of corporate screwery, betrayal, and poetic revenge, do me one small favor. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and maybe even subscribe. It keeps our little storytelling crew caffeinated and motivated, especially when we're churning out tales with this much spice and legal fire. Don't worry, won't ask again. You know where the buttons are. Anyway, where were we? Ah, yes, Monday. That morning I got the usual ping from our main vendor rep, Lisa, saintly patience of a woman. Hey, Margaret, just checking in, want to finalize the contract before the board shuffle hits. I smirked. She knew the drill. I typed back, signed, sealed, and buried in the vault. Because 6 months prior, I'd renewed our core enterprise license under my credentials. Why? Because when the leadership turnover started smelling like expired ambition, I knew better than to trust the usual process. So I quietly drafted the renewal myself, pushed it through procurement with zero fanfare, and embedded a dependency clause that tied it directly to my employee ID. Why? Because Margaret from licensing wasn't stupid. I knew when the wolves start howling, you don't ask if they're hungry. You sharpen your teeth too. And just like that, was in control of the single point of access for a $48 million license. They thought the platform ran on magic, or maybe an intern with Jira permissions. Cute. I went about my day as usual, watching the cracks form in the shiny new regime. The director, a former consultant who thought spreadsheets were optional if you had vision, started parading his authority like a dollar store peacock. My requests for budget alignment went ignored. Access requests I denied, overridden without reply. He once asked in a meeting if we really needed that auto-renewal stuff, as if the concept of recurring revenue was a decorative feature. Still, I did my job. Every error, every rollback, every skipped compliance check, I logged them. Not for revenge, for insurance. And on Monday at 5:12 p.m., I backed up everything into a secure folder. The renewal file, vendor comms, audit trails, little package I labeled when they ask. Tuesday morning, I showed up early just like always. Clean blouse, strong coffee, system humming. And then the conference call started and the director decided to flex in front of the finance team. Effective immediately, your bonus is frozen, he said, pretending it was a budget thing. We're reallocating performance incentives to align with new priorities. Translation: I'd asked too many questions. I didn't flinch. I didn't beg, even blink. I zipped my bag, stood up, and walked out. That's how the machine stopped being quiet. He didn't even look me in the eye. Your bonus is frozen, he said, teeth showing but no warmth behind it. A line delivered with the same care you'd give a coffee order. The whole finance team was there, Monday morning status sync turned firing squad. He just stood there, fake grin tight across his face like he was proud of himself. Budget adjustments, he added. Tapping his tablet like that made it more official. We're focusing on high-impact roles for Q4. High impact, my ass. The room went dead quiet. One of the interns blinked too fast. Someone shifted a chair. No one clapped this time. Not even the usual sing-claffers who fake chuckle at everything the director says like he's a walking LinkedIn post. Everyone knew this wasn't just a reshuffle. It was a message. I didn't ask questions. I didn't protest, didn't cry or slam anything or demand to speak to HR. I just reached for my bag, zipped it without looking down, and slid my mug toward the trash. It was clean anyway, unlike the meeting. The director cleared his throat, already turning to the next slide. The kind with synergy in Comic Sans or whatever consultant hell he came from. And just like that, 15 years of making the machine hum dismissed like a typo in a footnote. I walked out without a word. Junior analyst Haley, the one who always brought me peppermint tea when she knew I'd stayed late, caught my eye as I passed the door. Her lips moved without sound. I'm so sorry. She wasn't. Not really. Not because she didn't mean it, but because sorry implies something accidental. This wasn't. This was theater. Theatrical humiliation. And that fake-ass smile from the director, that was the encore. He needed a scapegoat, someone to sacrifice in front of the new VP from corporate who was observing process alignment. Translation, sniffing around for weak spots to bulldoze. They thought I'd take it, thought I'd go quietly, thought I was just an old spreadsheet which who wouldn't push back because she liked early mornings and laminated printouts. But here's the thing they never understood. Silence isn't surrender. Silence is the sound of a fuse burning. When I stepped into the elevator, didn't mash the buttons. I didn't pace or scream into my phone. I stood still, perfectly still, the way you do when you realize the fight is already over and they just haven't figured it out yet. Down in the parking garage, I sat in my car with the engine off and pulled out my work tablet. I opened the secured vendor folder. Inside it, 15 vendor contracts, a renewal matrix, and a file called Executed Renewal Final PDF. I tapped it once. My signature, dated 6 months ago, valid for 1 year, renewal clause tied to a specific employee ID. Mine. I'd set that clause myself after they pushed out my last manager and tried to streamline vendor ownership by tossing contracts around like party favors. I didn't trust them then. I sure as hell didn't now. I closed the tablet and smiled for the first time that morning. Not because I had a plan, not yet, but because I didn't need to. Already written it for me. The second they froze my bonus, they handed me the matches and built their own funeral pyre out of legal compliance paperwork. They just didn't know it was already burning. The director probably thought he'd get praise for optimizing compensation costs. He probably strutted back into his office thinking he'd reclaimed narrative authority or some other phrase he heard on a podcast while doing curls in the mirror. What he didn't know, what no one in that room realized, is that the entire auto-renewal system, the one they used to process enterprise client payments, was licensed through a platform that only responded to the designated signatory. A human signatory. Me. They'd automated everything but the access. You can streamline code. You can scale infrastructure. But you can't automate respect. You sure as hell can't override the renewal clause on a legally binding software license that requires 2 FA from the named user. I was the named user, and they'd just pushed me out, without bothering to ask what would happen when the license ran out. They were about to find out. The hum of the parking garage was louder than I remembered, somehow industrial and smug at the same time, like even the concrete wanted to condescend. I sat in my car with the windows up, engine off, breathing through the slow buzz building in my chest. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. It was the click of a lock inside me finally turning. I tapped open my tablet. No music, no distractions. Just one folder, Vendor Licensing Sensitive 2024. Inside, the tidy chaos only I understood, contract versions, approval emails, screenshots of vendor dashboards with my logins circled in red like crime scene evidence. I thought I was just good with numbers. No, numbers are clean. What I'm good with is leverage. I scrolled until I found it. Executed Renewal Final PDF. I opened it. There it was. My signature, my timestamp. 6 months ago. April 4th, 10:37 a.m., back when I still thought if I played nice and worked hard, someone upstairs might finally realize who kept the damn lights on. The license renewal was airtight, valid for 12 months. Payment obligations pre-approved. Vendor contact listed under one name only, mine, and the access protocol, multi-factor verification that pinged my device every 30 days to confirm continued employment. If I disappeared, the system went dark. That clause had been a negotiation point, buried in Section 14.3c of the service contract. To ensure traceable continuity, all administrative rights shall remain with the original signatory unless formally reissued with signatory's consent. Legalese for, if you want to take me off this thing, you better ask nicely. They hadn't. They'd frozen my bonus instead. Probably figured I'd slink away, tail between my legs, and some junior dev would take over my seat like nothing happened. Reset a password, click a drop-down menu, boom, Margaret who. Except the vendor platform didn't have a drop-down menu. It had a locked panel, one login field, and a button that sent authentication requests to a single registered device. Mine. I toggled to the audit log. The system had already pinged me this morning, exactly at 7:03 a.m., like clockwork. Admin verification complete. Next check-in, December 2. If they tried to log in without me, it'd flag the account, lock it, and alert the vendor's compliance team. 3 strikes and the license entered review. I had 2 changes to make. First, I updated the failover contact, not to another team member, but to a burner email I owned. That would redirect any urgent vendor inquiries directly to me instead of the catch-all IT queue they never check until Friday. Second, I changed the file permissions on the shared folder where the contract lived, previously viewable by legal, finance ops, and my old manager. Now, you'd only access, to me, no one else. If they tried to open it now, they'd see a pop-up, request access from owner, and the owner was no longer in the building. I didn't slam the tablet shut. I closed it gently like a loaded gun going back into its case. Power doesn't need volume, it just needs timing. My phone buzzed. A Slack notification, then 2, then 3. Director, need your input on license renewal doc. When you're back at your desk. IT help desk. Getting errors on billing automation. Any recent changes on your end? Legal Asha, hi Margaret, quick queue. Who's the main contact for the vendor licensing renewal? Can't find latest copy. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my personal notes app. A plain text list I'd been building since the first team reshuffle last year. Margaret's quiet war Jan 3. CFO said, we don't need audit logs if we trust our people. At 15, director overrides my denied expense flag. Said processes are flexible. APRA 4, executed renewal. Section 14.3c active. July 28, vendor training budget cut by 80%. OC 2, bonus frozen. No performance review on file. Every betrayal, every gaslight, every smug chuckle from leadership thinking I was just some harmless office relic who liked checklists and cardigan buttons. I wasn't. I'm not. I was and still am the living license key to their most critical system. And now that key is walking around unsupervised. They wouldn't feel it right away. Not today, but soon, like a slow drop in blood pressure before the fainting starts. Renewals would start to fail. Payments wouldn't process. Someone would blame IT. IT would point to the vendor would ask for the signatory, and then all roads would lead back to me. Still calm, still quiet, no longer loyal. By Wednesday morning, the emails were already flying like pigeons in a burning barn. Subject lines like urgent, renewal queue down and action needed. Auto-billing failures started popping up in my inbox, where I still had read-only access to internal threads. They hadn't revoked my credentials yet, probably assumed I was licking my wounds at home, maybe baking banana bread and journaling about personal growth. Cute. Inside the threads. Chaos. Haley, the sweet junior who mouthed I'm sorry on my way out, had clearly been voluntold to take point on the renewal platform while they figured out Margaret's handoff. Her first email was painfully polite. Hi all, noticing some odd behavior with the renewal dashboard. Tried to validate 2 queued contracts and got a platform error about license authentication. Anyone else seeing this? No response. Then 2 hours later, Lee again tagging at director at IT lead, vendor dashboard isn't allowing entry into admin panel. Getting blocked at sign-in. Please advise, still nothing. Finally, she tried the Hail Mary, looping in at vendor support to see if there's an outage on their end. And that's when the match hit the kerosene. The vendor replied fast. Vendor support at license@scom. Hello, Haley. We are not experiencing any outages. The platform is functioning as expected. Please note that your organization's enterprise license is currently configured to only accept authentication from the original signatory. To revalidate, that individual must log in and complete the 2FA protocol. Without this step, full access remains restricted. Boom. The vendor might as well have sent a singing telegram that said, you're locked out and you don't even know who holds the key. Because here's what was really happening behind those emails. The director still had half a protein bar in his teeth from his 9 a.m. performance fueling break was blaming IT. IT was blaming the vendor. The CTO was saying it's probably on their side. Just call them. The vendor was saying, you're adorable, try again. And all of them, every one of them, not a single person actually knew who signed the damn renewal. Because when Margaret from licensing disappears, and no one bothers to document the access chain, you get isn't disruption. It's corporate amnesia. They were flailing through shared folders, old Slack messages, archived emails, desperately trying to piece together who signed what and when. They couldn't find the signed PDF. It was no longer in the shared drive. The permissions were wiped. File history showed only access request pending. The director tried forwarding the vendor a contract version from 4 months ago, could practically smell the desperation through the pixels. Vendor's reply: this version is unsigned and invalid. Our records indicate the executed license is held under signatory D. Ellison. Please contact the original signatory. Cue the sound of a grown man Googling D. Ellison like it was a rare bird. He didn't even know my first name. Meanwhile, I was in my kitchen eating toast and watching my cat judge me from the windowsill. It updated my resume that morning, not out of panic, but principle. 15 years of loyalty deserved at least a well-formatted backup plan. I even added bullet points about cross-departmental license governance and end-to-end vendor compliance workflows. Not that anyone really knew what those meant, but they looked good in bold. Then I saved the file to a folder called Plan B and left it there. Because I wasn't sending it. Not yet. They weren't bleeding hard enough. Best part? I could have fixed it in 15 minutes. All they had to do was ask, but they didn't. Too proud, too confused, too deep in their own fog of fake efficiency and executive smirks. I watched as Slack filled with overlapping panics, each thread a different flavor of cluelessness. At 3:14 p.m., the director finally sent an all-staff, "Hi team, minor hiccup with the renewal dashboard. We're working with the vendor to resolve. Should be back online soon. In the meantime, please hold off on new contract approvals. Appreciate your patience. Minor hiccup, bless his heart." Meanwhile, the auto-renewal system was now flagging client invoices for manual review. A backlog was forming. Payments delayed. Revenue projections wobbling like a three-legged stool. And I just sipped my tea, the same peppermint Haley used to bring me. Funny, isn't it, how the same people who once treated you like wallpaper start clawing at the seams when you vanish. They hadn't just lost access to a dashboard. They'd lost the only person who knew how to keep the lights on. And the lights were starting to flicker. They thought they could brute force it. Thursday morning, someone, probably the CTO's intern, bless his caffeinated soul, tried to brute reissue the license, pushed a fresh request through the vendor portal using the director's credentials and a brand new admin email address labeled Ops Primary 2024 at, like slapping duct tape over a cracked dam and hoping the river politely waits its turn. It didn't work. Vendor came back within 15 minutes, cold and clinical, request denied. The current enterprise license is bound to original signatory D. Ellison. Platform reissuance requires two-factor authentication from the existing license holder or formal deactivation, followed by compliance verification. Current request lacks valid authentication. Status: pending, original signatory authentication. That little status line, so sterile, so surgical, was now the company's silent executioner. It showed up everywhere, on the dashboards, in the logs. The automated failure notices now pinging internal emails like popcorn in a microwave. Pending, like a guillotine waiting for someone to blink. Revenue Ops was on fire. The monthly renewal queue was now backed up by 72 stalled contracts. Finance had to manually walk through invoices they didn't understand. An enterprise client emailed to ask if they'd been deplatformed. One poor sap in sales tried to reactivate his own permissions and got his credentials suspended for non-compliant override attempt. IT ran out of explanations. By 7:30 p.m., the Slack messages stopped being formal. Haley messaged me privately, "Haley, hey, I know things are weird, but are you okay? Just wanted to say thank you for everything." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't care, but because I was still letting the silence do its work. Can only hear truth in a room that's gone quiet. And then came the text. 9:42 p.m., unknown number. I knew who it was before I opened it. "Director, hey, you around? Want to chat?" Not sorry, not we made a mistake. Just want to chat. Like we were coworkers who just bumped into each other at the Keurig. I stared at it for a long time. Let it sit. Watched the little delivered status pulse at the bottom. I locked my screen and slid the phone face down on the counter. He'd never contacted me directly before. Not even when I led the system migration last year that saved the company $400,000 in compliance penalties. Back then, he'd thanked the VP instead, who wasn't even on the project. Now, suddenly, he wanted to chat. I left him on read. 10 minutes later, the other message came in. This one from legal. Ashal Legal Affairs. Hi, Margaret. Hope you're well. Quick thing, could you take a look at a routine vendor form? Looks like there's a minor access hiccup. Totally routine, shouldn't take more than a minute. The emoji. God, the emoji. I read it 3 times, then typed one line, ask the director. That was it. No pleasantries, no legal tap dance, just a redirect. I didn't owe them clarity. I had already given them the terms back in April. They just didn't read them. Quietly, opened the vendor portal on my end. Not to do anything drastic, just to watch. Watched as another failed login attempt came in from a device labeled Finance Main 2. Watched it trip the temporary lockout protocol. Watched the dashboard begin to throttle access in real time. Each failed override was a slow surrender, atom by atom. They didn't realize it yet, but power was already shifting, not with a bang, but with denial codes. Later that night, I opened my old work calendar. They hadn't removed my read access. Friday morning was blocked off for leadership offsite. Q4 strategic alignment. Of course. They were supposed to be off sipping overpriced espresso in some cabin, whiteboarding buzzwords and filming drone footage for the corporate sizzle reel. Instead, be scrambling to explain why the system that handled $11.3 million in monthly renewals now blinked red every time someone logged in. I bookmarked the calendar entry. Then I closed my laptop, fed my cat, and went to bed, peacefully. At 8:59 a.m., the license expired. Not with a bang, not with an alarm or a siren. Just a quiet tick, 1 digital second, and the platform's lifeblood stopped flowing. A stillness in the code, kind that doesn't scream but waits, patient and lethal. At 9 a.m., everything stalled. The auto-renewals froze mid-cycle. Dozens of payment jobs failed in sequence, time-stamped like gravestones in the audit logs. The dashboards, finance, sales, ops, all flickered red, then flatlined. Every panel now reading the same cold phrase: authentication failed license status. Inactive, the office didn't explode. It imploded. Quiet first. Confused and frantic. Phones started ringing. Not customer calls, internal, like neurons firing in a brain that just suffered a stroke. Someone in accounts tried to force a batch through manually. Error. Someone in client ops refreshed the payment gateway 5 times. Nothing. And someone, God bless them, tried unplugging the modem. As if that would fix a license lock tied to a biometric token and a federal-grade compliance agreement. Haley, still seated at the edge of the finance bullpen, stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed her. This can't be right, she whispered, clicking and reclicking. At 9:03, legal burst into the boardroom. Ashao was white-knuckled and wordless, holding a single sheet of paper. Not an email, not a Slack message. A printed document. The room, already thick with tension, went silent as she dropped it onto the conference table. It was the renewal. The real one. Vendor Licensing Agreement Enterprise Platform Renewal 2024 to 2025. Signed, D. Ellison date, April 4, 2024, Clause 14.3c. Administrative access remains exclusive to signatory unless reassigned by consent. The director leaned over it, reading like it was in another language. He swallowed. Once. Twice. Who's D. Ellison? Nobody answered. The CTO muttered, Wait, Margaret. That's Margaret's last name? The intern in the corner, the one who once called me the spreadsheet which, behind my back, whispered, I thought her name was just Margaret. And then, without ceremony, the founder walked in. He was dressed for the offsite, dark jeans, branded pullover, the kind of casual effort that says I still pretend I'm one of you. But he stopped mid-step when he saw the screens. All of them. Frozen, pulsing red error codes like a room full of failing heart monitors. He looked around, first at legal, then at the director, then the CTO. Nobody met his eyes. What he started, voice low, What's going on? The CTO cleared his throat. We're experiencing a license issue. The founder stared at him like he'd just announced the building was made of cheese. Ashas slid the paper across the table. He read it. His face changed, not dramatically, but in slow motion. Tension slid from his jaw to his shoulders, like the weight of the entire company had just shifted an inch left, and he wasn't braced for it. He read my name, he knew it, he whispered it. Please tell me she didn't sign this. But she had, months ago, in silence. In her own little corner under flickering fluorescent lights, sipping peppermint tea and watching the empire lean a little too far forward. Now it was toppling. Outside the boardroom glass, teams were scrambling. Support was being flooded. Sales reps were texting clients. Engineers were pretending it wasn't their problem. But inside that room, no one moved. The founder didn't yell. He didn't rage. He just stared at the paper. Then the wall of screens. Then the director, who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes, because it wasn't just a frozen system. It was a weaponized document, and I was the one who pulled the pin. Silence broke with the soft ding of the IT Slack channel, lighting up across devices. IT admin Joseph. Confirmed. License is tied to employee ID D. Ellison. Reauthentication requires 2FA via her registered device. Last verification. Oct 2, 7:03 a.m. A second message followed like a hammer. IT admin Joseph. All override attempts failed. Access attempts by Ops Primary 2024 at and Finance Main 2 at logged as invalid. Platform has entered compliance lockout. That was it. No exclamation marks, no panic, just cold digital certainty. The system was doing exactly what it was designed to do, and it was doing it without them. The director exploded first. Why the hell is her ID still active? Why didn't anyone transfer the access when she left? Wasn't yelling at anyone in particular. Just into the void, trying to find someone dumb enough to answer. CTO didn't even look up from his tablet. That was her system, he said flatly. She built the framework. She negotiated the license. You pulled her out without a transition plan. The director turned on him like a snake. You're blaming this on me? CTO shrugged. No, I'm blaming your ego. Another Slack message rolled in. Vendor support at license@scom. Per contract terms, administrative access cannot be reassigned without consent from original signatory. Please refer to clause 14.3c. Deactivation window has closed. A staff from legal actually closed her eyes like she was making a wish to disappear. The founder didn't move. He was still holding the single printed page, the one with my signature and the binding clause. Hands weren't trembling. Not yet, but they looked heavier. Like that single sheet of paper weighed 100 pounds. Someone in the corner mumbled, "Can't we just reset the credentials?" CTO looked like he wanted to laugh. Reset what? You think you can factory reset a clause that requires biometric reauthentication every 30 days? This isn't Gmail. This is an enterprise-grade license, Margaret, designed for this exact scenario. And none of us have the admin token. The founder finally exhaled through his nose. Slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for months, and this was the only thing left to do. He read the signature again, not my first name, not the woman they called Margaret from licensing. Just the letters at the bottom of the page, D. Ellison. They'd ignored me for years, never once asking what the D stood for. Now they were staring at it like it was a curse. The founder didn't yell. He didn't argue, just folded the page once neatly and placed it on the table. Then, with a soft breath and no fanfare, he stood up and walked out of the boardroom. No one followed. No one said a word. I watched it all unfold through the audit trail. The logs painted the story in colorless precision. Failed override, failed override, failed override. My system, my framework, silently defending itself like a castle no one realized had a drawbridge and boiling oil until they tried to knock. Grim satisfaction isn't fireworks. It's watching people who thought they were gods get humbled by the fine print they didn't bother reading. It's watching the machine you built do exactly what it was meant to, long after they tried to erase you from the picture. Back at home, I sipped my coffee and refreshed the vendor portal again. Status, license, inactive, admin contact, D. Ellison access, locked, action required, signatory reauthentication. I didn't move. I just watched the red warnings pulse like a heartbeat. They'd finally reached the part where power doesn't look like a title or a parking spot. It looks like a single name on a single document and the quiet woman they never bothered to understand. The call came at 7:42 a.m. Friday. Unmarked number. Local area code. Straight to voicemail. I didn't answer. Let them stew. At 8:05, an email pinged my personal inbox. Subject line was harmless. Request for conversation from board member. Inside, it was only 2 sentences long. Margaret, I hope this finds you well. Would Would you be open to a short call regarding the license matter? No threats, no fake warmth, no passive-aggressive HR tone, just the quiet wording of someone who finally realized the building's on fire and the only working extinguisher quit 3 days ago. I replied, 10 o'clock a.m. 15 minutes, phone only. At 10 o'clock on the dot, I answered. Margaret, the voice said, measured. Male, older. One of the quieter board members, James, if memory served. The kind who always wore charcoal suits and let everyone else talk first in meetings. I'm not calling in any official capacity, said, just trying to stabilize a situation that's become unnecessarily disruptive. Unnecessarily, I said, voice calm. You're down $4.8 million in stalled payments this week. He paused. Yes, which is why I'm asking, plainly, if you'd consider consulting. Strictly to re-establish platform access. No strings, no rehiring, just a professional engagement, generously compensated. Word consulting hung in the air like a bribe wearing a business casual shirt. Define generously, I said, already pulling up the market rates in my head. Whatever's fair, he replied. I'll name the number, I said. Understood. I'll also require a clause. 2, actually. I could hear him click a pen. Go ahead, 1 public apology from the director. On internal comms, not some whispered email or after-hours memo. In writing. Signed. He hesitated, then scribbled something. 2, formal acknowledgement of my work. 15 years of it, from the founder, that may be. Complicated, I cut in. That's not my problem. I don't care if he dictates it through gritted teeth while an intern transcribes it. I want it on paper. He sighed, not annoyed, defeated. He knew I had all the leverage, and the fee, I named a number. High, not outrageous, not illegal, but enough to sting. Enough that the next time they thought about sidelining a quiet woman in the corner office, they'd remember the invoice. There was a long pause. Just breathe and shame, and whatever spreadsheet he was now updating in real time. Margaret, he said slowly, we weren't aware of how integral. No, I said, you were. You just didn't care until it became expensive. Silence again. Understood, he said. I stood in my kitchen, one hand on my coffee mug, watching the cat paw lazily at a sunbeam. Calm, detached, in control. I'll send my terms, I said. You have until noon. He didn't try to bargain. He just said, okay, and the call ended. I didn't gloat. I didn't dance or pop champagne or text Haley a victory gif. I just sat down at my laptop, opened a clean document, and began typing. Consulting Agreement D. Ellison, followed by the amount, the clauses, a reminder at the bottom in bold. License access will not be re-established until written acknowledgement is received and payment is confirmed. That was the return. Not back to the office, not back to the grind, but back into their orbit on my terms. They thought I needed them. They forgot what happens when the power walks out wearing orthopedic flats and a faded cardigan. It doesn't beg, it bills. At 11:59 a.m., nothing. No reply. No counters. No just checking in messages from legal or timid intern outreach disguised as status updates. Just digital silence. Noon struck like a gavel. 12:01, phones started ringing. First legal, then ops. Then one frantic voicemail from the CTO. We thought it was handled. Why is it still showing locked? Because it was. Very much still locked. Their window had closed. At 12:07, a chef from legal tried to salvage it. We're aligned on the terms, said breathlessly. Minor delay getting signatures. Can we proceed under intent while paperwork finalizes? No, I said. I'm not a verbal contract. I'm not a vibe. I'm a signature. Click. 12:13, the founder issued a directive. The director, Mr. Bonus Freezer himself, was to be transitioned off the license matter. Corporate euphemism for, you screwed it up so badly we need to remove your fingerprints just to salvage the body. At 12:28, I walked into the boardroom. I didn't wait to be announced, didn't knock. I pushed the door open and stepped in like I'd never left. Inside, the founder, the CTO, legal, and one red-faced board liaison pretending to be calm while visibly sweating through his tie. I didn't speak. I placed the folder on the table. Inside, a printed version of the license agreement. Updated, signed. Staring up from the last page in bold. Eagle font, sole administrative control retained by D. Ellison. There was no small talk, no forced smiles. Just the founder flipping through the pages like each clause was a belt he was being lashed with. When he reached the end, he paused. Hand hovered. Then, slowly, he picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he signed. The room exhaled like a collective hostage had been released. I stood still, straight-backed, unapologetic, no makeup, no blazer, just the same cardigan and sensible shoes they'd always overlooked. now standing in the middle of the storm they had created, and I had ended. I looked at the founder. He didn't meet my eyes, and that was fine, because I wasn't there for his approval. I was there for closure. Next time, I said, voice even, freeze your own bonus. Nobody laughed. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved as I turned and walked out. Behind me, the boardroom stayed silent, save for the tap-tap of someone logging in, because the system was already rebooting. Dashboards flashing green, renewal queue resuming, invoices clearing. The machine back online under my control, not just functionally, legally. No more shared logins, no more ignored warnings. Just one name at the top of the access chain, mine, Margaret D. Ellison. They bought back what they thought they'd already owned. And I didn't gloat. I didn't look back. I walked through the office, past the interns, past Haley, past the portrait of the founder smiling like a benevolent shepherd, and out into the daylight, alone. Ruthless triumph doesn't roar. It walks out of a burning building with a folder and a clause, and leaves the door swinging behind it. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.